At any point in our lives, we are always in one of three stages. First, aspiring or trying to get to success. Second, succeeding after aspiring. And third, possible failure. In this video, I'll be sharing with you these 5 amazing lessons which will help you deal with whatever stage of life you find yourself in, complete with awesome illustrations along the way. I learned all of this from spending hours poring over the pages of Ego is the Enemy by the brilliant writer Ryan Holiday, and these lessons on the screen here are what I thought gave me the perfect framework for succeeding in anything we do in life. There are 3 steps under the Aspire stage, so let's head on to step 1. In the early 1980s, members of Metallica assembled to inform their guitarist, Dave Mustaine, that he was being thrown out of the group. That same day, a decent young guitarist, Kirk Hammett, was given the job. One would assume that this is the moment Hammett had been waiting for his entire life. Indeed, it was. But it was around this time that Kirk came to realize that perhaps he wasn't as good as he'd like to be. So he looked for a guitar teacher. This was a guy who was already super talented at playing the guitar, but still he wanted to learn everything he didn't know. On the other hand, if you find yourself thinking thoughts like, I'm smart, I'm talented, I already know what I need to know, that's your ego speaking. Someone with a big ego who thinks they know everything, they're like a full cup. If someone tries to give them possible words of wisdom, it'll be wasted, spilling out over the top. Because the cup is already full, the water's in the way, the ego's in the way. Instead, you should always try to be like an empty cup. Always embrace the beginner mindset of thinking, I don't know what I don't know, and always be learning no matter how good you objectively are, exactly like Kirk Hammett. Without your ego in the way, you can be like this cup, taking in and retaining all the info that is given to you. After all, Epictetus says it is impossible to learn that which one thinks one already knows. As a content creator in my 30s, I find myself constantly learning from creators in their 20s. And sometimes I find myself feeling like oddly defensive because of that age difference. Sometimes I think, he's so young, I shouldn't be learning from someone like him. That is ego. Whenever I find myself thinking these kind of thoughts, here's what I tell myself.
Here's a full cup. Now shut the full cup.
And that is step 1. Always be a student and always be learning. And now we move on to step 2. In his famous 1934 campaign for the governorship of California, the author and activist Upton Sinclair published a short book titled I, Governor of California and How I Ended Poverty, in which he outlined in the past tense the brilliant policies he had enacted as governor, the office he had not yet won. However, observers noticed immediately the effect it had on Sinclair. He seemed somehow to have lost interest in the campaign. In that vivid imagination of his, he had already acted out the part of I, Governor of California, so why bother to enact it in real life? The book was a bestseller, the campaign a failure, with Sinclair losing by more than 10 percentage points. When you have to do something important, which is easier? Talking, discussing, and strategizing about something, or actually going into the trenches and doing that thing? Exactly. Ryan says this, talking and doing fight for the same resources. We basically have a limited amount of willpower and motivation each day. Sometimes when I have a great idea for a video, I love to spend time strategizing about it, daydreaming about how it'll go well, and sharing with my partner how creative a video this will be. That's the easy thing to do, basically talking about it. And what did this do? It made me feel like I accomplished something when in actual fact, I haven't done anything at all. So my motivation for making the video decreased significantly. And when I actually sit down to make it, I sometimes struggle, and sometimes I would even throw the entire video idea away. Basically, the more we talk, the less we execute and actually do stuff. So ideally, keep your goals to yourself until you're done executing on it. Talk less. The less energy you spend on talking, the more willpower you will have to do and execute, and that is what will bring you to success. And that is step 2. Talk less and you'll have more motivation and willpower left over to dedicate to doing, not talking. In step 3, let's talk about actually doing the work. Think about your personal aspirations in life. What do you want to be? What do you want to achieve? Do you want to be a writer, a runner, a YouTuber? Now, listen to this. You know that all things require work and that work might be quite difficult. But do you really understand? Do you have any idea just how much work there is going to be? Not work until you get your big break, not work until you make a name for yourself, but work, work, work forever and ever. Is it 10,000 hours or 20,000 hours to mastery? The answer is that it doesn't matter. There is no end zone. To get to where we want to go isn't about brilliance, but continual effort. Also, this is what Ryan says.
I think the middle ground between crippling self-doubt and insufferable ego is confidence. Confidence is the opposite of ego. It's based on real skills, real self-awareness, on doing the work, on empathy, on understanding, on objectivity, on reality and realism. And that's the essence of the book.
Absolutely freaking beautiful. So here we have crippling self-doubt on one extreme. On the other extreme, insufferable ego. Ego thinks accomplishment is the end point, and you bestow upon yourself a title like, hey, I'm a writer, I'm a runner, I'm a content creator. On the other hand, confidence is the opposite of ego. It is the perfect middle ground. Confidence is based on real skills and actually doing the work, not just having a title to call yourself by. You're not a writer just because you've written a book that got on the New York Times bestsellers list. You're a writer because you love writing and you write every single day. You're not a runner just because you once completed a marathon. You're a runner because you love running and you run every day or every week. You're not a YouTuber just because you had one video go viral. You're a YouTuber because you love creating content and are constantly producing video after video. And that's step 3. Just put your head down and do the work day in, day out. Slowly but surely, you will develop confidence and not ego. Hopefully, these 3 steps on aspiring will get you to the end goal of being humble in your aspirations. If you don't try to keep your ego in check early on, the worst case scenario here is that you'll never learn, never improve, and you'll never get to the next stage, which is success. And on that, let's move on to step 4, what to do when you do become successful. At the end of the Civil War, Ulysses S. Grant was one of the most respected and important men in America. However, despite Grant expressing almost no prior interest in politics, and in fact, had succeeded as a general precisely because he didn't know how to play politics, chose instead to pursue the highest office in the land, the presidency. Elected by a landslide, he then presided over one of the most corrupt, contentious, and least effective administrations in American history. Grant had accomplished so much, but to him, it wasn't enough. He couldn't decide what was important, what actually mattered to him. This is how Ryan explains it. Most of us begin with a clear idea of what we want in life. We know the goals that are important to us, and if you're humble in your aspirations, you will eventually get to where you want to be. But the thing is, the more you accomplish, the more often you meet other people who are more successful than you. This will likely make you feel small and insignificant. What happens here is that your ego turns into envy and you want not just what you already have, but what others have that you don't have. The only way to resolve this is to ask yourself this question. Why do you do what you do? Why do you need this amount of money in the bank? Because that's your objective number for financial independence based on real math? Or because your friends have that much money? Why have you chosen this next step for your career? Because you genuinely love the work or because the title sounds cool? Apply this to all other aspects of your life too. Take the time to think about it, really think about it. Figure out and define what's important to you before doing anything crazy, or you will lose sight of yourself, and that is step 4. Even when you're successful, you should always aim to be gracious, humble, and not envious of others. If you don't, you could always fall from grace, just like Grant and his presidency. That leads us into failure, and that's what we're gonna cover in step 5. John Kennedy Toole's great book, A Confederacy of Dunces, was universally turned down by publishers, news that so broke his heart that he later committed suicide in his car. After his death, his mother discovered the book, advocated on its behalf until it was published, and it eventually won the Pulitzer Prize. What changed between those submissions? Nothing. The book was exactly the same. If only he could have realized this, it would have saved him so much heartbreak. He couldn't, but from his painful example, we can at least see how arbitrary many of the breaks in life are. Even when we do everything right, we may not get the results we think we deserve. For example, I invest many hours and hundreds of dollars in each of my YouTube videos. Subjectively, I guess I do think they deserve more views. However, what I get is sometimes just like 10 views per video. This gap between what I'm actually getting and what I think I deserve is my ego getting in the way. Don't focus on this ego. Don't focus on results. Don't focus on what you think you deserve. That's not within your control. It can be very arbitrary. Instead, focus on just doing good work. That is within your control. Be proud of the good work you did, whether or not it was well received, and that is step 5. The effort is enough. Hopefully this will allow you to be more resilient in your failures rather than giving up, or worse, ending your life like John Kennedy Toole. I'm going through a binge of all of Ryan Holiday's books, and I'll leave a compilation of them on the screen when I'm done with all his Stoicism books. Hopefully it'll be out soon, and I'll see you in that one.